The hotel ballroom in Manhattan was a sea of golden light and polished sophistication. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a warm, almost dreamlike glow over the crowd. The soft clinking of champagne flutes blended with the hum of conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. It was elegant, glamorous even, but beneath it all, there was a chaotic energy, a forced enthusiasm that came with corporate gatherings like this one. I stood near the edge of the room, holding a drink I had no intention of finishing. The glass was cool against my fingers, condensation dripping onto my palm, but I barely noticed. My mind was elsewhere, detached from the festivities around me. I had come to this end-of-year party out of obligation, not enjoyment. Social events had never been my forte. I preferred the quiet structure of my office, where everything followed a predictable rhythm, spreadsheets, reports, numbers that made sense in ways people never did. Here, amidst the sea of colleagues dressed in their finest attire, exchanging pleasantries that meant nothing, I felt like an outsider. I offered polite smiles, nodding at the right moments, but it was all mechanical. The truth was, I wanted to be anywhere else. And then I saw her. Olivia. She stood near the dance floor, her figure illuminated by the warm glow of the chandeliers. Her laughter rang through the air, effortless and melodic, as if she belonged in this world in a way I never could. She held a glass of red wine, the deep color mirroring the shade of her lips. There was something about her there had always been, but I had never allowed myself to dwell on it. She was my colleague. Someone I exchanged emails with, passed in the hallways, spoke to only when necessary. And yet, there had been moments, small, fleeting instances, where I caught her looking at me. Her gaze would linger, sharp and assessing, before she turned away as if nothing had happened. I had always convinced myself it was nothing, a trick of my overactive mind. But tonight, something felt different. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. She wasn't just another coworker. She was watching me now, and she was coming closer. The moment she stepped into my space, I felt it. A shift in the air, a change in the atmosphere that had nothing to do with the party around us. Her perfume hit me first, a captivating mix of jasmine and something deeper, woodsy, almost intoxicating. It was a scent that lingered, wrapping around me like a whispered secret. Her lips curled into a knowing smile, one that made my stomach tighten. Finally, she murmured, tilting her head slightly as she studied me. Someone who isn't pretending to have fun. A breath of laughter escaped me before I could stop it. It was nervous, unsure. That obvious? She smirked, sipping her wine before answering. Only to someone who's paying attention. Her words sent an unexpected thrill through me, and for the first time that night, I was no longer thinking about escape. I should have known then that this moment, this woman, was going to change everything. The party pulsed around me, a swirl of music, laughter, and the low hum of voices blending into an indistinct melody of celebration. I had spent the first hour of the evening keeping to the shadows, half hidden near a cluster of cocktail tables at the edge of the ballroom, nursing a drink I had barely touched. I had no desire to be here, no interest in playing along with the carefully curated corporate camaraderie that filled the room. But Olivia had other plans. I should have expected it. From the moment she approached me, there had been something in her eyes, an intent, a quiet but undeniable determination. It wasn't loud or demanding, but it was there, subtle and steady, weaving through our brief exchange like an unspoken challenge. And when she extended her hand toward me, an invitation wrapped in a teasing smirk, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to go with her, but because some part of me already knew that once I stepped away from my self-imposed distance, once I let her pull me into her world, something fundamental would shift. But I followed her anyway. She led me toward a group of colleagues gathered near the center of the room, their conversation punctuated by bursts of laughter and the rhythmic clinking of glasses. I expected the usual polite nods, the surface-level pleasantries that often came with these interactions, but to my surprise, they welcomed me effortlessly, as if I had always been part of their inner circle. Someone handed me another drink, and before I could protest, Olivia's fingers brushed against my wrist. Just a fleeting touch, light and momentary, but it grounded me in place. And so, for the first time that night, I allowed myself to relax. The conversation flowed around me, lively and easy, the kind that required no effort to engage in. I found myself laughing at stories I barely understood, at jokes that might not have been all that funny, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Because for the first time since arriving, I wasn't counting the minutes until I could leave. And then it happened. We had drifted toward the bar, Olivia and I, still caught in the lingering echoes of laughter from whatever story had just been told. My mind was light, loosened by the warmth of the room, the low thrum of music, the alcohol I had barely tasted but had undoubtedly felt. I wasn't thinking about anything at all until I felt her hand on my waist. It wasn't a firm touch. Not possessive, not overtly intentional. It was soft, careful, like the brush of a whisper against my skin. And yet, it sent a shock through me so sharp, so immediate, that I nearly gasped. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs, my pulse stuttering in a way that was impossible to ignore. She didn't pull away. Her hand remained there, fingers resting lightly against the fabric of my dress, the warmth of her palm seeping through the thin material as if it had been waiting there all along. The space between us, already close, suddenly felt smaller, charged with something neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. I could have moved. I could have shifted, stepped away, pretended it hadn't happened. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, utterly still, my body betraying me in its refusal to break the contact. And when I finally found the courage to turn my head, to meet her gaze, I found her already looking at me. There was something unreadable in her expression, something that made my stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with the quiet, undeniable pull of whatever this was. Her eyes, dark, searching, locked onto mine, and for a brief, dizzying moment, I forgot how to breathe. I expected her to say something, to make a joke, to brush it off as an accident. But she didn't. Instead, her lips curved into the barest hint of a smile, small, knowing, patient. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "It's okay." The words settled between us, light but heavy, simple but layered with meaning I couldn't yet decipher. Was it okay? I didn't know. But I didn't pull away. And neither did she. Everything changed after that night. It was subtle at first, the kind of shift that could have been dismissed as coincidence if I hadn't been paying attention. But I was paying attention. The office still looked the same, sterile, controlled, a world of muted grays and crisp professionalism. The hum of fluorescent lights remained steady, the murmur of hushed phone calls and the rhythmic clatter of keyboards unchanged. The scent of stale coffee and printed paper filled the air, grounding me in the familiar. But something beneath it all had unraveled, leaving a thread loose in the fabric of my carefully maintained reality. Because Olivia was different. Or maybe I was. I felt it in the way our encounters stretched just a second too long, in the stolen glances that neither of us were quick enough to disguise. In the weight of her presence when she passed by my desk, her scent, a mixture of jasmine and cedar, clinging to the air long after she had gone. She wasn't avoiding me. No, that would have been easier. Instead, she lingered. In the break room, when she reached for the same coffee mug I did, our fingers brushed. Just a whisper of contact, but enough to make my pulse stutter. I pulled away too quickly, spilling a few drops onto the counter, and she had only smirked, as if she knew exactly what she was doing to me. In the conference room, when she slid a document toward me, her knuckles grazed the inside of my wrist. It could have been an accident, but I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure of anything. The tension between us was an unspoken thing, simmering just beneath the surface, threading its way through every shared space, every moment of proximity. It wasn't something I could define, not yet, but it was there, tangible and charged, as if we were both waiting for the other to be the first to acknowledge it. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was overanalyzing, that the way my skin burned where she had touched me was just a trick of my mind, nothing more. But Olivia didn't act like it was nothing. She watched me. Not in a way that was intrusive or obvious, but in a way that felt deliberate, calculated, like she was waiting for me to admit what I wasn't ready to say out loud. And the problem was, I didn't know what I wanted. I had spent years constructing a version of myself that fit neatly into expectations. The reserved, focused professional. The one who valued structure, logic, control. But Olivia was disrupting all of it. With nothing but a glance. With nothing but a touch. And then, 1 week after the party, she asked me to meet her for coffee. It wasn't an unusual request. Colleagues went for coffee all the time. There was no reason for my heart to trip over itself when I saw her message appear on my screen. No reason for my palms to go damp as I hesitated before typing a simple, single-word response. Okay. The cafe was small, tucked into a quiet corner of Brooklyn, far from the glass and steel sterility of our office building. It smelled of roasted espresso and vanilla, the kind of place where people curled up in worn leather chairs with books and lost themselves for hours. It was intimate, unassuming, a world apart from the professional space where we had always existed before. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, fingers wrapped loosely around a steaming cup of something dark and rich. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable at first. But then, the corner of her mouth lifted, and the weight in my chest shifted, tightened. I hesitated for only a second before crossing the room and taking the seat across from her. "Didn't think you'd come," she said lightly, stirring her coffee with slow, deliberate movements. "I almost didn't," I admitted before I could stop myself. She hummed, her eyes flickering to mine, sharp with something I couldn't name. "Why?" I hesitated, swallowed, looked down at my untouched cup. "Because I don't know what this is." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached out. Her hand moved across the table, not rushed, not hesitant, just sure. And then her fingers found mine, warm and steady, pressing against my skin with an intention that sent a shiver through me. There was no music this time. No crowd. No alcohol to use as an excuse. Just us. Just her touch. And for the first time, I didn't pull away. A storm took hold of me in the days that followed, growing in strength with every glance, every fleeting touch, every unspoken moment between us. It was relentless, a force I couldn't outrun, couldn't suppress, no matter how much I tried. And I did try. I told myself I could push it away, that if I just ignored it long enough, it would fade into the background, dissolve into nothing. But Olivia didn't let that happen. She was everywhere, brushing past me in the hallway, leaning just a fraction too close when she handed me a file, letting her fingertips skim against mine as if she had every right to. It was never enough to be obvious, never enough for anyone else to notice, but for me, it was seismic. I found myself anticipating these moments, my breath hitching at the possibility of them. I hated the way I had become hyper-aware of her presence, how I could sense her before I even saw her. It was maddening. And yet, some part of me craved it. Every day felt like a battle between my instincts and my carefully constructed logic, between the part of me that wanted to step closer and the part that screamed for distance. But the truth was, I had already lost the war. Olivia had unraveled me, thread by thread, until I was no longer the person I thought I was. Until the idea of resisting became nothing more than a lie I told myself. And then, on a night when the rain drummed against my window like impatient fingers, Olivia shattered whatever illusion of control I had left. The message came in just as I was considering turning off my phone, pretending I didn't see it. But my fingers moved before my mind could catch up, my heart already hammering as I stared at the screen. "I need to see you." 3 simple words. Nothing more. But they tore through me with the weight of everything unsaid. I should have questioned it. Should have asked why, or told her it was late, or pretended I was too tired to meet. But I didn't. Because beneath the nervous energy twisting inside me, something else had been waiting, something I hadn't allowed myself to name. I found myself following the address she sent without hesitation, my thoughts tangled in a mess of anticipation and fear. The city was slick with rain, the pavement reflecting neon lights in fractured puddles. My breath fogged the air as I stepped out of the cab, standing in front of a small, dimly lit bar in Soho. It was unassuming, tucked away between taller buildings, a place you could walk past a dozen times without ever noticing. But Olivia had chosen it. And so I went inside. She was already there. She sat at the bar, one leg crossed over the other, a glass of whiskey resting between her fingers. The golden liquid caught the light as she swirled it absently, lost in thought. But the moment she saw me, her expression shifted, just slightly, just enough. Her lips curled into something small, almost knowing, and the impact of it hit me like a silent confession. I swallowed hard, stepping toward her as if gravity had chosen my path for me. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the quiet murmur of the bar. The air between us felt charged, a magnetic force pulling taut between our bodies. And then, before I could second-guess my decision to come here, Olivia spoke.
We need to talk about that.
Her voice was steady, but there was something beneath it. Something restrained, something careful. As if she was giving me an out. As if she was waiting to see if I would take it. I didn't. I inhaled sharply, forcing air into my lungs, but the truth was, I didn't know how to answer her. Because there was nothing to say that wouldn't expose me completely. That wouldn't break down whatever wall I had left standing between us. But Olivia didn't rush me. She let the silence stretch, her gaze never leaving mine, patient and unyielding all at once. And in that moment I understood. She wasn't here to play games. She wasn't here to let me keep running. I had a choice. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I wanted. So when she moved closer, when the space between us dwindled into nothing, I didn't pull away. There was no hesitation, no fear, just the rain outside, the warmth of her breath against my skin, and the undeniable certainty that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same again.